would definitely advise a small startup company to be as narrow and as focused as is possible to be. If you look at the original Amazon business plan, there was no hint of anything other than books in it, and it was not on my radar. I was thinking I wanted to build an online bookstore. That was it. And it worked way better than I thought it would, and we launched music, and that worked better than I thought it would, and we launched videos. I think it's so long ago I can really remember. I think it was actually VHS tapes. Is that possible? And that worked better than we thought it would. And then I sent email to customers. So I picked about 1,000 customers, and I said, besides the things we sell today, books, music, and video, what would you like to see us sell? And the list came back incredibly long tail. It was almost like whatever was on their mind at the moment. It was like, I wish you sold windshield wipers for my car. And I was like, really? Windshield wipers? That wasn't on the business plan, but that's an interesting idea. And so today, we basically, if you're buying your windshield wipers anywhere else, you're probably getting ripped off. So it's been, kind of one foot in front of the other. One of the key things about lean, defect reduction, being efficient, not letting defects travel downstream in any process. If you're going to eliminate waste, or as the Japanese call it, muda, you have to have information. And the data center has historically been an information-free zone as far as application developers are concerned. You would write code, and you have no idea how it's consuming resources. You're too insulated because you're in a pool of resources, and you can't meter it. One of the biggest, still unappreciated benefits of AWS is that application developers get a real sense of which inner loop is driving all the cost. Yeah. And that's a big deal. So that's just starting to, that's one of the ways that this approach to infrastructure dramatically reduces costs. In our data center, in our fulfillment centers and in our customer service centers, we have, we're always seeking to keep defects from moving downstream. So this is a principle that was probably best applied in the first best applied by Toyota. And they had this idea of what they call the and-on cord, which basically any factory worker could pull the cord and stop the whole automobile manufacturing line. And for old school auto manufacturing companies, that was considered crazy, absolutely insane. In fact, the opposite principle was typically at work, which is you did everything possible to keep that line running. And here, Toyota flipped that on its head, and they said, look, anytime there's a defect, no matter how small, we want you to pull the cord and stop the whole line. And stopping things, if you do that in a line that has a lot of defects, initially you get a lot of and-on cord pulls, and it's very expensive. But over time, if you use that approach, you eliminate the defects closer and closer to the source. And the people who are fans of lean manufacturing and these kinds of techniques take almost as an article of faith, although there's a lot of evidence to support this in very diverse industries, that the further a defect travels downstream, the more expensive it becomes to fix. And so you want to stop those things. You don't want them to repeat and happen over and over. Just find something that you're passionate about. I would definitely, on the career advice side, the most important thing about your first job out of school is to pick a place where you think where your learning per unit time is going to be very high. You can optimize for a bunch of variables, and it can get very confusing. Where is the location? What's the salary going to be? And all those things are worth considering. They're all important. But make sure you pull back after you've done your analysis and say, am I also picking the place that I believe my learning per unit time is going to be the fastest? And you learn much more from a best practices company than you do. You learn no matter where you go. So if you go work for somebody and you're like, God, these people are all crazy. This is insane. You'll learn a lot of negative lessons that you can use later, and you can not do those things. But that process of elimination method takes a long time. So it's better to try and find a place that has really high hiring standards. Some of the basics, especially, a place that's trying to recruit only A's hire A's, and B's hire C's, and C's hire D's. So you've got to hire only A's. And you need to pick a company that's doing those kinds of fundamental practices well, because then you'll learn so much. It'll set you up to do other things. So I would say that's probably the best career advice. Sometimes, we expand into new areas in two ways. One is kind of, from a customer need. We will work from a customer need to the skills that we need. And the other one is skills forward, from a skill set we have to a new set of customers. So Kindle is an example of a customer need, and so we don't have any hardware skills. We've been doing this for 10 years now, but if you go back in time 10 years, we had no hardware team. We had to hire somebody to lead our hardware group, and then build a hardware team and build some institutional competence at it, and so on. That's a customer need backwards approach. And then skills forward, a great example of that is Amazon Web Services. We had the skills to do AWS. We had probably more distributed computing expertise than anybody else in the world because of the transactions. Transaction systems are so complicated and hard to build, and we had a service-oriented architecture of great complexity, probably before anybody else. And so because we were doing that, we could kind of see the future a little bit, and decided to build AWS, which has turned into a huge business in its own right. And that is, if you were always, business is very situational, and so rules of thumb are good, but they have to be applied to the right situation. So sometimes the old maxim that you should stick to the knitting is correct, but sometimes the adage that you should stick to the knitting is wrong. And a senior leader's job is to figure out in which situation are you. There are a few things I think if you want to be an innovative company that you have to do. First of all, I think innovation is a point of view. You have to actually select people that are part of the company who want to innovate and explore. Being a pioneering company, an explorer company, isn't for everybody. Some people wake up in the morning and they get their energy, the thing they think about in the shower is they start their annual planning process, or however you want to think about it, with who are the 3 companies that we're going to kill this year. That's the conqueror mentality. And it's a competitor-focused mentality instead of a customer-focused mentality. And there's nothing, that mentality can succeed, by the way. So I'm not claiming, the pioneering explorer approach is the only effective one. But when you attract people who have the DNA of pioneers and the DNA of explorers, you build a company of like-minded people who want to invent. And that's what they think about when they get up in the morning. How are we going to work backwards from customers and build a great service or a great product? That's a key element to invention. And that part is fun, by the way. So if you're the right kind of person and you like to invent, you like change, everything you see as you move about the world, you think how it could be improved, that's just fun. And we at Amazon, we've over the last 18 plus years attracted a bunch of people like that, and we have a ton of fun doing it. Any young person, even before they start their career, is to really think about their choices. Because I find young people, and when I was young, I made this mistake too. You can get very fixed on your gifts. So everybody has gifts. You have gifts and you have things that you didn't get gifted. Maybe you're extremely beautiful. Maybe you're extremely good at mathematics. There are a lot of things that you can be given. But those things can confuse you because they're not the things that construct your life. It's your choices that construct your life, not your gifts. You can celebrate your gifts. Be proud of them. Be happy of them. Actually, don't be proud of them. Be celebratory of them, but you can't be proud because they're gifts. They were given to you. You didn't earn them. You can only be proud of the things you earn. And so as I got older, I started to realize I wasn't proud of my gifts. I was always good at school. School was always easy for me. And I was always proud that I was a great student. I got A's in all my classes. I was good at math, all of that. And I thought that's who I was. But it's not true. Those are the things that are gifts. What was hard for me is deciding to work hard, deciding to use my gifts in certain ways, to challenge myself, to do things that I didn't think I could do, to put myself in uncomfortable situations. We all I would say to a young person, you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure. Which one of those, when you're 90 years old, are you going to be more proud of? I believe that the primary success factor for Amazon.com has been an obsession over the customer and a focus on customer service. This is clearly important in any business, but especially important online. And the reason for this is that word of mouth is incredibly powerful online. If you make a customer unhappy on the internet, they won't tell 5 friends. They will tell 5,000 friends on Usenet news groups and listservs and so on. Likewise, of course, if you can make a customer happy by meeting or exceeding their expectations, they can also tell 5,000 people and therefore, be evangelists for you. They can use the internet as a megaphone. So it's very important to do the things that you actually are going to claim to do. And what this means basically is the balance of power has shifted away from the merchant and toward the consumer, which is a great thing, I think, for everybody involved. And it's even great for the merchant as long as the merchant realizes it. I was in all the senior people at Amazon do 2 days of customer service training every other year. And several years ago now, I was in one of those customer service training sessions, and I was taking calls from customers. I had an experienced customer service agent with me, listening in, helping me figure out how to use the tools, keeping me out of trouble, making sure that I did a good job for the customer. And the customer, this particular call that I got, the customer, as soon as we pulled up her order, the experienced customer service agent leaned over to me and whispered in my ear and said, she's going to want to return that table. She had purchased a piece of furniture, a table. So I'm talking to the customer to the customer, and the customer says, I need to return this table. And it turned out that the top of the table was scratched. It was packaged poorly. And then, so we finished up and we handled the return and got all that done. And I said to the agent, how did you know that the customer was going to return that table? She said, oh, that table always gets returned. And so, what does that mean? That means that, it's an anecdote, but if you systematize that and kind of pull back, it means that there's no communication flowing from these people who are talking to the customers every day back to our fulfillment centers where the actual shipping and packaging is going on. And it's very difficult to get that communication to happen. It can't just happen easily. So we built a kind of, inspired by the idea of an end-on cord, where any customer service agent can pull a product off of the Amazon website if they think that there's a problem. And then, of course, having pulled that product off, that sets in place a whole series of processes that go back, but we're not going to ship the same table to the same customer over and over. One of the things about maintaining, first of all, it's somewhat about the selection of the people. So if you want to have a creative culture, When I interview people, I ask them to give me an example of something they've invented. And I always point out it doesn't have to be something that you actually took to the patent office, but something it could be a metric that you invented and followed carefully. It could be a business process that you invented. But how do you go about, what's your method for? So you want to select people who like to invent their way out of boxes. And don't necessarily immediately go to either or. We can do A or B. And you know, the right question is, how can we do A and B? What invention do we need to be able to do both? So that's a lot about selection of people. And the great thing about corporate cultures is they're very self-reinforcing. So this could, I mean, somebody who comes to Amazon and doesn't like pioneering, doesn't like exploring, doesn't like going down blind alleys that oftentimes turn out to be dead ends, they'll leave. You know, they're self-selecting. And so we have, over the last 18 years, collected a bunch of people who really enjoy this kind of pioneering approach. Once you are looking at the odds in a realistic way, it's very important for entrepreneurs to be realistic. And so if you believe on that first day while you're writing the business plan that there's a 70% chance that the whole thing will fail, and you know, then that kind of relieves the pressure of self-doubt. I mean, it's sort of like, I don't have any doubt about whether we're going to fail. That's the likely outcome. And it just is. And to pretend that it's not will lead you to do strange and, you know, unnatural things. So we, you know, and what you do with those early investment dollars, you know, so if you have $300,000 and then you have $1 million, what you do with those early precious capital resources is you go about systematically trying to eliminate risk. So you pick whatever you think the biggest problems are, and you try to eliminate them one at a time. And that's how small companies get a little bit bigger, and then a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, until finally, at a certain stage, you reach a transition where the company has more control over its future destiny. You know, when a company is very tiny, it needs a tremendous amount of not only hard work, but as we talked about earlier, luck. As a company gets bigger, it starts to become a little more stable, where if at a certain point in time, the company has a much bigger influence over its future outcome, it needs a lot less luck, and instead it needs the hard work. And at that point, there's a little bit more pressure, because then if you fail, you have nobody to blame but yourself. It's hard to have conviction about whether something will work. And the only thing that I can offer, every once in a while, you get a crisp moment of clarity where you just know some things are going to work if you are persistent enough. And I think you can only do that if you start with the customer and work backwards. I don't think you can build that kind of clarity on what your competitors are doing or what kinds of technologies are available in the marketplace. That kind of clarity can only come from a deep understanding of customer needs. And the good thing about customer needs is they change slowly in time, so you can count on them. I know for a fact that 10 years from now, Amazon's customers will still want low prices. I know for a fact that Amazon's customers 10 years from now will still want fast delivery. They'll still want vast selection. And there's no chance that 10 years from now, somebody will come to me and say, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. So because those customer needs are so foundational, sometimes around those things you can get real clarity. And then you can invest, and you can know that your investments will pay dividends for customers over time. Do something you're very passionate about, and don't try to chase what is kind of the hot passion of the day. I think we actually saw this. I think you see it all over the place in many different contexts, but I think we saw it in the internet world quite a bit, where at the sort of peak of the sort of internet mania in, say, 1999, you found people who were very passionate about something. They kind of left that job and decided, I'm going to do something in the internet, because it's it was almost like the the 1849 gold rush in a way. I mean, you find that people, if you go back and study the history of the 1849 gold rush, you find that, at that time, everybody who was within shouting distance of California was, they might have been a doctor, but they quit being a doctor and they started panning for gold. And that almost never works. And even if it does work, according to some metric, financial success or whatever it might be, I suspect it leaves you ultimately unsatisfied. So you really need to be very clear with yourself. And I think one of the best ways to do that is this notion of projecting yourself forward to age 80, looking back on your life and trying to make sure you've minimized the number of regrets you have. That works for career decisions. It works for family decisions. Do you want? I have a 14-month-old son, and it's very easy for me to, if I think about myself when I'm 80, I know I want to watch that little guy grow up. And so I don't want to be 80 and think, shoot, I missed that whole thing and I don't have the kind of relationship with my son that I wished I had, and so on and so on. One of the great paradoxes of inventing at a high level is that you need to be an expert in your domain area and you need to have a beginner's mind. You absolutely need both of those things. The world is too complex to actually just be a beginner. So, I can't, no matter how inventive I am, I can't go invent a new kind of brain surgery. You have to be a neurosurgeon. You have to already know all there is to know about brain surgery and then take it to the next level. The problem is, for many people, by the time they become true experts, they've lost that ability to see things in a fresh way. They've lost the beginner's mind. And so that's another thing. You always need to be stepping back and saying, if I'm an expert in launch vehicles or whatever it is, I need to step back and say, okay, if I were looking at this for the first time, what would I be seeing and noticing? These are just some of the things you need to do to be innovative. We got this company just about ready to launch, and we were looking at it and looking at this little tiny fulfillment center. We were here by then in this building. We had a basement fulfillment center. To call it a fulfillment center was very grand. There's a lot of puffery. It was 400 square feet, which is about the size of a one-car garage. And we launched this business, and we're looking at it, and we didn't know if anybody would order from us. We really didn't. And in fact, one of the software engineers looked at this little space, and he said, I can't figure out whether this is incredibly optimistic or hopelessly pathetic. And indeed, we didn't know. We had no idea whether anybody would want to buy things in this way. The business plan called for generating sales very slowly as customers changed their attitudes. The original business plan, which I thought was very optimistic at the time, called for Amazon.com to generate $70 million in sales in the year 2001. We actually generated in excess of $3 billion in sales in the year 2001. And we knew, by the way, that we were really on to something in those first 30 days. In the first 30 days, we got orders from all 50 states and 45 different countries with not a dollar of advertising, just all word of mouth. In the first year, we didn't spend anything on advertising. All of it was word of mouth. And that really forged the company that we were going to focus on customer experience because we saw the power of word of mouth so very, very clearly in those early days. There's something great about word of mouth online, by the way, and feedback from customers, which is that email turns off the politeness gene in the human being. It's wonderful. So people actually tell you what they really think, usually in all caps. So we get lots of info and feedback from our customers, and we try to use it well. Blue Origin is a company that's developing a vertical takeoff, vertical landing space vehicle. So it takes off on its tail like a normal rocket and then comes back and lands on its tail like a Buck Rogers rocket. It's designed to be reusable. We've built our first development vehicle. We built our second development vehicle. We're right now working on our third development vehicle. Great team of engineers located in Seattle. Another team of people test and operations in West Texas where we do our flights. And it's proceeding along very nicely. I'm hopeful that this third development vehicle will be our last, but we can't know for sure. And then we will build our operational vehicle and start taking people to suborbital mission. We'll sell tickets. The long-term goal of Blue Origin is to not only do suborbital, but also orbital, and to democratize space travel so that anybody who wants to go into space can afford to do so. You need reusability. So when you go look at any approach that doesn't have reusability is never going to be low cost. There are only two problems with space travel today. It's too expensive and it's too dangerous. Other than that, it's fine. So we hope to solve those two problems. And if you want to solve those problems and have a spacefaring species, you need to practice. And you can't practice with expendable vehicles. It's like, it's flying you get on a 747 with a bunch of other passengers, fly to Hawaii, and then throw the whole plane away. It's just a bad cost structure. And so we need reusability. So you have to get the vehicle back. And one of the ways to get it back is to put wings on it, and then you can land it on a runway. Another way to get the vehicle back is to land it vertically under rocket power. And both techniques have advantages and disadvantages. One of the things I like about vertical landing is if you get it to work, it's very scalable. It scales to very, very large size, whereas wings sort of, they top out a bit. I laugh a lot. So it is, there are, I think stress, you can be, I think one of the things that's very important to note about stress is that stress primarily comes from not taking action over something that you can have some control over. So if I find that some particular thing is causing me to have stress, that's a warning flag for me. What it means is there's something that I haven't completely identified, perhaps in my conscious mind, that is bothering me, and I haven't yet taken any action on it. I find as soon as I identify it and make the first phone call or send off the first email message or whatever it is that we're going to do to start to address that situation, even if it's not solved, the mere fact that we're addressing it dramatically reduces any stress that might come from it. So stress comes from ignoring things that you shouldn't be ignoring, I think in large part. So stress doesn't come, people get stress wrong all the time, in my opinion. Stress doesn't come from hard work, for example. You can be working incredibly hard and loving it. And likewise, you can be out of work and incredibly stressed over that. So, and likewise, if you kind of use that as an analogy for what I was just talking about, if you're out of work, but you're going through, a disciplined approach of, a series of job interviews and so on and working to remedy that situation, you're going to be a lot less stressed than if you're just worrying about it and doing nothing. I am building, along with a team of people, including the father of the 10,000-year clock, a guy named Danny Hillis, in a mountain in West Texas, a very large clock designed to last 10,000 years. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Moments ago, he seemed sane. But the clock is a symbol for long-term thinking. And if we can build a clock, and we think we can, there's a lot of engineering that goes into this clock. It's exceedingly complicated, and we don't have enough time to talk about the cam that tracks the motion of the Earth's orbit as it deviates over the course of 10,000 years and so on and so on. There's a lot of interesting stuff if you want to keep time for 10,000 years. But the symbol is important for a couple of reasons. One, if we think long term, and here I'm thinking, when I say we, I mean we humans, if we think long term, we can accomplish things that we couldn't otherwise accomplish. So if I came up to you, Werner, and I said, look, I want you to solve world hunger in 5 years. You would rightly decline the challenge. But if I said, Werner, I want you to solve world hunger in 100 years, now that's more interesting. Because then you start to first create the conditions under which such change could occur. And all we've done there is change the time horizon. We didn't change the challenge, we changed the time horizon. So time horizons matter. They matter a lot. And the other thing I would point out is that we humans are getting awfully sophisticated in technological ways and have a lot of potential to be very dangerous to ourselves. And it seems to me we're, as a species, going to have to start thinking longer term. And so this is a symbol. I think symbols can be very powerful. The clock has 5 anniversary chambers. These are big. This is all carved out inside of a mountain. And in the remote, it's kind of like you have to take a pilgrimage to get there. And when it's finally done, we'll, let people come and tour the clock. But it has 5 anniversary chambers. The first one is a room that kind of like the cuckoo on a clock, and it shows this animation once a year. The second chamber does its animation once every 10 years. The third chamber once every 100 years. The fourth chamber once every 1,000 years. And the 5th anniversary chamber just once at the end of the 10,000 years. And we're only planning to build the animations for the first and second chambers. We figure our future generations can worry about the 3rd, 4th, and 5th chambers. Directionally, our goal, and this has been true it's kind of a cultural trait at Amazon, our focus is going to be the low-cost provider of these kinds of high-quality services. So as we are able to get smarter, as we're able to figure out how to do things more efficiently, we are going to be returning those cost efficiencies to customers in the form of lower prices on things like EC2. There are other things that that it may be that we need some instance sizes that are smaller than what we have today. So the smallest instance we have today is 10 cents per compute hour, and we're also looking always at returning some of the cost savings we get on things like bandwidth charges, disk space charges, and so on and so on. The good news is that those things do get cheaper over time, and as we get more efficient and organized, we'll be able to return, I think, quite a bit of savings to customers. I talk a lot about willingness to be misunderstood. That's a really important thing to have. If you're going to do anything new or different in the world, it is going to be misunderstood, sometimes by well-meaning critics, sometimes by self-interested critics. You'll get all kinds. And it's okay. It's all part of the process. The only way to avoid criticism altogether is to be completely conventional in everything you do. And so how do you respond to the criticism? What do? What's the right thing to do? Well, I think the first thing you do is you ask, are the critics right? You listen, you ask, are they right? Or even if they're not completely right, is there some piece of it that's right, that you can be inspired by? And then if you decide, by the way, that the answer is no, that you believe, you have conviction that what you're doing is the right course, then no force in the world should be able to move you. You should have a deep keel. But if you decide that your critics, that there is something, then you should change. And I give you an example from the early days of Amazon of one where we refused to change. We were small enough that most people didn't pay much attention to us or care about us. I'm taking you way back to like 1995, 1996. We pioneered this thing called customer reviews. And I got a letter one day from a publisher, a book publisher, that said, hey, you must not understand your business. You're losing sales because you're allowing negative customer reviews on the book detail pages. Why don't you just put positive reviews? And I thought about this, and I thought, no, he's wrong. We don't make money when we sell things. We make money when we help people make purchase decisions. It was a different framing. And so getting to today's news, we listened to our critics, and we decided the framing that we have been using all these years is competitive compensation. We look at what other job opportunities there are and what the competitive compensation levels are, and we offer competitive compensation and actually non-competitive, world-leading benefits packages, but just competitive compensation. And so in light of this, thinking about this and trying to decide, do we want to change, we realized, we just made a decision, well, you can offer competitive compensation or you can decide to lead. And as soon as we framed it that way, we're like, let's decide to lead.
It's a great
and I think people will follow.
What was it the critics said that caught your eye?
Basically, they were saying, if you read between the lines, because a lot of the specific criticism was not correct, but if you read between the lines, what they really wanted us to do, they said, because you could also say, look, there's so many companies. There are all the fast food companies, there's, the baristas, and there's, like, wait a second, why are you focusing on us? But what they're really saying is, we're focusing on you because you're a leader, and we want you to lead. That's what they're actually saying. And as soon as you recognize it that way, instead of it feeling like criticism, it feels empowering. They're asking us to lead because we're a symbol of an innovative, iconic company. We're a gold standard for innovation. We should lead. The advice that I would give entrepreneurs is, and I do this, I meet sometimes with young aspiring entrepreneurs and college grads, and I have, the main thing is don't chase the hot new thing, whatever it is. It's so hard to catch something that everybody already knows is hot. Instead, position yourself and wait for the wave to come to you. And the way and so then you would say, well, where? Position myself where? And I think what you do, position yourself in something that captures your curiosity, something that, that you're missionary about. Well, I tell people, when we acquire companies, I'm always trying to figure out, is this person who leads this company a missionary or a mercenary? And I don't like mercenaries, and I don't like mercenary cultures. And the missionary is building the product, building the service because they love the customer, because they love the product, because they love the service. The mercenary is building the product or the service so that they can flip the company and make money. And one of the great paradoxes is that the missionaries usually end up making more money than the mercenaries anyway.